Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he adjusted his combat gear one final time. The lunar training facility hummed around him with the sound of advanced machinery and the quiet conversations of nervous cadets. Today was the day they had all been preparing for during their 4 years at the Terran Military Academy. The final simulation that would determine their graduation rankings and military assignments. Lisa Carter checked her tactical display for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic interface as she reviewed terrain maps and enemy position data. She had scored highest in strategic planning throughout their training, but this exercise was different. The instructors had been unusually secretive about the details, only telling them it would test their abilities against theoretical alien combat scenarios. Ryan Brooks packed his demolitions kit with careful precision. Each explosive charge was placed exactly where it belonged in his equipment harness. He had grown up on a mining station where his father taught him that explosives were tools that demanded respect. One mistake could kill not just him, but his entire squad. His hands were steady, despite the nervous energy building in his chest. Katie Walsh organized her medical supplies in order of likely need. Field dressings, biofoam injectors, pain suppressors, and emergency stimulants all had their proper places in her medic pack. She had seen real combat injuries during a training accident 2 years ago and knew that when things went wrong, every second mattered. Her teammates depended on her to keep them alive when the simulation turned dangerous. Alex Turner ran final diagnostics on his communications equipment. The quantum entanglement transmitters were functioning perfectly, and his translation software showed green across all known alien language databases. Communication was often the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. He took pride in being the voice that connected his squad to command and each other when everything else fell apart. Colonel Patricia Hayes entered the preparation chamber with her usual confident stride. The 5 cadets immediately stood at attention, their conversation stopping mid-sentence. Hayes had served in 3 different colonial conflicts and carried herself with the bearing of someone who had seen real war. Her presence always reminded them that their training had serious purpose beyond academic exercises. "At ease, cadets," Hayes said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "Today you face the Galactic Conflict Simulator, the most advanced training system ever developed by human military science. This simulation uses quantum processing to create scenarios based on theoretical alien warfare tactics. You will face enemies whose psychology, technology, and combat methods are completely foreign to human understanding." Jake felt his pulse quicken. The rumors about this final exercise had circulated through the academy for months. Some claimed it was impossible to complete successfully. Others whispered that previous classes had suffered psychological trauma from the realistic alien combat scenarios. He glanced at his teammates and saw his own mixture of excitement and apprehension reflected in their faces. "The environment you are entering will challenge every assumption you have about warfare," Hayes continued. "Gravity levels that would crush unprotected humans, atmospheric conditions lethal to Earth life, and terrain that defies conventional tactical thinking. Your mission parameters will adapt based on your performance, becoming more complex as you demonstrate competence." Lisa raised her hand. "Colonel, what are our victory conditions? How do we know when the simulation is complete?" Hayes smiled, but there was something strange in her expression that Jake could not quite identify. "The simulation ends when you have neutralized all hostile forces and secured your objectives. The enemy AI is programmed to fight until total defeat or tactical withdrawal. Some scenarios may last hours, others could extend for days, depending on your strategic choices." Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his gear harness. "Colonel, what kind of alien weapon should we expect? Are we talking energy-based systems, kinetic projectiles, or something completely outside human technology?" "All of the above and more," Hayes replied. The simulation draws from extensive theoretical research into possible alien military capabilities. You may encounter weapons that manipulate gravity, alter local time flow, or attack through dimensions we barely understand. Your survival depends on adaptability and creative thinking, rather than superior firepower. Katie checked her medical scanner readings on the simulation pods. The biometric displays showed stress levels and neural activity patterns that seemed unusually intense for virtual reality training. Colonel, the life support readings seem higher than normal training simulations. Are we looking at enhanced sensory input? The realism level is set to maximum, Hayes confirmed. Pain, fatigue, environmental stress, and psychological pressure will all feel completely authentic. The only difference between this and real combat is that death in the simulation results in extraction rather than actual casualties. However, the trauma response is identical to genuine warfare conditions. Alex tested his communication links one final time. The quantum entanglement channels showed perfect synchronization with the simulation network. Colonel, will we have contact with Academy Command during the exercise, or are we operating independently once the simulation begins? Hayes paused before answering, and Jake noticed that same strange expression cross her face again. Communication. Protocols are classified aspects of this exercise. You will receive whatever tactical support the scenario parameters allow. Your primary focus should be on squad cohesion and mission completion rather than external assistance. The 5 cadets exchanged glances. Something about their instructor's responses felt different from previous training briefings. There was an undercurrent of tension that seemed out of place for even the most challenging simulation exercise. Jake decided to voice his concern directly. Colonel, is there something about this exercise we should know? The briefing feels different from our previous training simulations. Hayes looked at each cadet individually before responding. This simulation represents the culmination of your military education. Everything you have learned about tactics, strategy, survival, and teamwork will be tested simultaneously under conditions designed to push you beyond your perceived limitations. The scenarios are based on real intelligence data about potential threats humanity might face among the stars. She moved to the simulation pod controls and began the startup sequence. Banks of quantum processors hummed to life around the chamber as the virtual reality systems powered up to full capacity. Remember that you are representing not just yourselves, but the entire human species in this exercise. The decisions you make and the tactics you employ will be recorded and analyzed for future military planning. The simulation pods opened with soft pneumatic hisses. Inside each pod, a complete sensory immersion system waited to transport the cadets to whatever alien battlefield the quantum computers had prepared for them. Jake looked at his teammates one final time before climbing into his assigned pod. Lisa settled into her tactical coordination station with practiced efficiency. Ryan double-checked his demolitions interface connections. Katie verified her medical monitoring systems. Alex confirmed his communication array synchronization. They were as ready as 4 years of intensive training could make them. Colonel Hayes initiated the final startup sequence. Good hunting, cadets! Show the galaxy what humanity is capable of achieving. The pods sealed shut, and reality faded away as the simulation began. Jake opened his eyes to find himself standing on rocky ground under a sky filled with 3 different colored suns. The gravity felt wrong, pulling at his body with nearly twice the force he was used to on Earth. The air burned his lungs with each breath, and his environmental suit immediately began filtering out toxic compounds that would have killed him in minutes. This was unlike any training simulation he had ever experienced. Lisa checked her tactical display and frowned at the readings. The enemy positions showed on her scanner as a series of fortified bunkers built into a mountainside that rose nearly straight up from the valley floor. According to the mission briefing that appeared in her helmet display, these alien defensive positions had never been successfully attacked by any galactic military force. The terrain analysis showed impossible angles and weapon placements that should have made assault completely hopeless. Ryan surveyed the target area through his demolition scope. The alien fortifications were built from some kind of crystalline material that reflected energy weapons and absorbed kinetic impacts without showing damage. Traditional explosives would barely scratch the surface, but Ryan had learned during his mining station childhood that every material had weak points if you knew where to look. He began identifying stress patterns in the crystal formations that might respond to precisely placed charges. Katie monitored her squad's biological readings and felt her training kick in immediately. Jake's heart rate was elevated from the heavy gravity, but his conditioning was holding steady. Lisa showed signs of mild atmospheric irritation despite her suit's filters. Ryan's adrenaline levels were spiking as he analyzed target data. Alex was experiencing minor disorientation from the alien environment, all normal responses that she could manage with proper field medicine. Alex established communication links between the squad members and tried to contact their command base. The quantum entanglement transmitters were working perfectly, but instead of reaching the academy, he was receiving strange interference patterns. The signals seemed almost like language, but unlike anything in his translation databases. He decided to focus on maintaining squad communications rather than worrying about the unusual external chatter. Jake led his team forward across the valley floor, using natural rock formations for cover as they advanced toward the enemy positions. The tactical situation seemed hopeless by every military standard he had learned. They were 5 soldiers attacking a fortified position designed to withstand assault by thousands. But something in his mind refused to accept that the situation was impossible, and he began seeing opportunities where the simulation expected him to see only obstacles. The first alien weapons opened fire when they reached the halfway point across the valley. Beams of coherent energy sliced through the air around them, and Jake rolled behind a boulder as superheated rock fragments exploded from impact points. The weapons were accurate and powerful, but they fired in predictable patterns that suggested automated targeting systems rather than intelligent operators. Jake began timing the firing sequences and found gaps in the coverage. Lisa analyzed the enemy fire patterns and realized the aliens had made a critical tactical error. Their defensive positions were optimized for stopping large-scale frontal assaults, but they had not considered the possibility of a small unit using irregular movement patterns. She began calculating approach routes that would exploit blind spots in the overlapping fields of fire. Her tactical computer kept insisting the approach was impossible, but her human intuition saw a clear path. Ryan identified the perfect targets for his demolitions work. The crystalline bunkers were built on natural rock formations, and those formations showed stress fractures from millennia of geological activity. If he could place shaped charges at specific points along the stress lines, the entire mountain face would collapse and take the alien fortifications with it. The amount of explosives required should have been impossible to carry, but Ryan had learned to make every gram of explosive material count for maximum effect. Katie moved from position to position under enemy fire, treating minor injuries and monitoring her teammates for signs of combat fatigue. The alien energy weapons created burns that were unlike anything in her medical training, but her basic field medicine knowledge adapted quickly to the new injury patterns. She developed treatment protocols in real time, using standard medical supplies in innovative ways to counter the alien weapon effects. Alex intercepted more of the strange signals and realized they were not random interference. The patterns showed structure and complexity that suggested intelligent communication. His translation software could not decode the meaning, but the emotional content was becoming clear through universal mathematical and musical patterns. Fear, confusion, and something that might have been desperation. He filed the information for later analysis and focused on coordinating his squad's tactical communications. Jake led a flanking maneuver that should have been impossible under the circumstances. He moved his team through a series of coordinated sprints between cover points, timing each movement to coincide with gaps in the alien firing patterns. The enemy weapons tracked their movement but could not adjust quickly enough to target humans moving with the speed and unpredictability that came naturally to a species evolved from persistence hunters. Lisa coordinated the final assault approach, using tactics that violated every principle of conventional military strategy. Instead of trying to overwhelm the enemy positions with superior firepower, she directed her team to exploit the psychological and technological limitations of their opponents. The aliens had built their defenses to stop predictable attacks, but humans specialized in being unpredictable when survival depended on adaptation. Ryan reached his target positions and began placing explosive charges with surgical precision. Each charge was calculated to create maximum structural damage with minimum explosive material. He worked under direct enemy fire, his hands steady despite the impossible circumstances. His mining experience had taught him that the right amount of explosive in exactly the right place could accomplish what massive bombardments could not. Katie provided covering fire while treating Ryan's minor burns from near-miss energy weapon strikes. Her medical scanner showed that the alien energy weapons caused cellular damage at the molecular level, but her field medicine training adapted to the new challenge. She developed rapid treatment techniques using standard medical supplies to counteract the alien weapon effects in ways that should not have been possible. Alex detected a dramatic change in the alien communications patterns. The signals were becoming more frequent and more urgent, mathematical sequences that looked like coordinates, followed by harmonic patterns that suggested retreat or withdrawal commands. The alien forces were not responding to the human assault, with increased aggression as expected, but with something that seemed almost like panic. The impossible happened when Ryan's charges detonated simultaneously along the mountain's stress fractures. The entire cliff face collapsed in a controlled avalanche that buried the alien fortifications under millions of tons of rock. The enemy fire stopped completely, and an eerie silence settled over the battlefield. Jake's squad had accomplished. In hours, what the simulation had assumed would take weeks or prove completely impossible. But the strangest part was yet to come. Jake stared at his communication display in confusion as messages began flooding in from sources that were not supposed to exist in their training simulation. The text appeared in languages his translator had never seen before, but the mathematical components were clear enough: surrender offers, peace negotiations, and what looked like formal military capitulations. This was not how training simulations were supposed to work. Lisa analyzed the tactical situation and found herself facing scenarios that went far beyond anything in their academy training. New enemy positions appeared on her scanner every few minutes, but instead of attacking, they seemed to be withdrawing before her squad even approached. Entire battle groups were abandoning fortified positions that should have taken weeks to capture. Her tactical computer kept generating error messages because the enemy behavior did not match any known military doctrine. Ryan examined the wreckage of the collapsed mountain fortification and discovered something impossible. The alien technology, buried under the rocks, was real physical matter, not virtual reality constructs. His demolitions training had taught him to recognize different materials and energy signatures, and everything he was seeing had the characteristics of actual alien engineering rather than computer simulations. But that was supposed to be impossible. Katie treated squad members for injuries that felt completely real, despite supposedly being in a virtual environment. The burns from alien energy weapons left actual tissue damage that responded to her medical treatments exactly like real combat injuries. Her medical scanner readings showed genuine biological trauma rather than simulated feedback. Something was very wrong with what they had been told about this exercise. Alex continued intercepting alien communications and began recognizing patterns. That suggested these were real-time military transmissions rather than programmed simulation responses. The emotional content was becoming clearer as his translation software adapted to the alien language structures. Fear, panic, desperate attempts to coordinate retreats, and repeated references to something they called Deathworld demons. The aliens seemed genuinely terrified of his human squad. The next phase of their mission briefing directed them to a different planet entirely. Jake found himself and his team standing on a world of floating crystal formations suspended in a methane atmosphere. Their environmental suits adapted automatically to the toxic conditions, but the gravity here was so light that each step sent them bouncing several meters through the dense gas. The enemy positions were built into the floating crystals themselves, creating a three-dimensional battlefield unlike anything from human military history. Lisa studied the tactical challenge and realized that conventional ground-based warfare concepts were completely useless here. The alien defensive positions could move through three-dimensional space, and there was no solid ground to provide stable firing positions. But her human brain began adapting to the unusual environment, seeing opportunities for movement and attack that took advantage of the low gravity and dense atmosphere. She started developing completely new tactical approaches in real time. Ryan discovered that his explosives worked differently in the methane atmosphere, creating sustained combustion reactions that could be directed through the dense gas like guided weapons. The floating crystal formations had internal stress patterns that could be exploited with precisely placed charges, causing chain reactions that would collapse entire defensive networks. His mining experience was proving valuable in ways that standard military training never could have prepared him for. Katie learned to provide medical treatment while floating through a three-dimensional combat environment. The methane atmosphere actually helped with some injury types by providing natural antiseptic properties, while the low gravity reduced blood loss from wounds. She developed new field medicine techniques adapted to the alien environment, turning environmental hazards into medical advantages through pure human adaptability. Alex intercepted communications from multiple alien civilizations that seemed to be coordinating some kind of galaxy-wide military response. The translations were becoming clearer as his software learned the alien language patterns, and what he was hearing made no sense in the context of a training simulation. References to real star systems, actual military units, and casualty reports that numbered in the millions. These aliens were discussing the human squad as if they were a genuine military threat to entire civilizations. The floating crystal battlefield became a nightmare for the alien defenders as Jake led his squad through impossible maneuvers. Humans had evolved to navigate complex three-dimensional environments like forest canopies and rocky cliffs, and that evolutionary background translated perfectly to combat among floating crystal formations. They moved through the methane atmosphere with a grace and speed that their alien opponents could not match or predict. Lisa coordinated attacks that exploited the aliens' fundamental misunderstanding of human capabilities. The enemy had built their defenses assuming attackers would move in predictable patterns and follow conventional military logic. But humans specialized in creative problem-solving and adaptation, turning every environmental challenge into a tactical advantage. Her strategies violated every rule of galactic warfare, which made them completely effective against enemies who expected conventional attacks. Ryan's demolitions work created cascading explosions that brought down entire sections of the floating Crystal City. Each charge was placed with mathematical precision to trigger chain reactions through the crystal matrix, causing structures that had stood for millennia to collapse in minutes. The aliens had never encountered anyone who understood both explosive engineering and three-dimensional structural analysis well enough to turn their own city into a weapon against them. Katie provided combat medical support while bouncing between floating platforms under enemy fire. She treated injuries from alien weapons that fired crystalline shards designed to shatter inside organic tissue, but her field medicine training adapted to counter the alien weapon effects. She kept her squad combat effective in an environment that should have been lethal to human life, using medical techniques that no alien civilization had ever encountered. Alex began receiving what could only be described as surrender broadcasts from multiple alien governments. The mathematical components were clear enough to understand without translation. Offers of tribute, promises of non-aggression, formal military capitulations, and desperate pleas for mercy. The aliens were surrendering to a 5-person human squad they believed represented some kind of unstoppable Deathworld invasion force. Back at the academy, Colonel Hayes stared at readouts that made no sense, according to everything she understood about their training simulation. The exercise was generating tactical scenarios and enemy responses that went far beyond the programmed parameters. The artificial intelligence running the simulation seemed to be creating new challenges in real time, responding to the cadets' actions with increasing desperation and complexity. Jake felt a growing suspicion that their training exercise had become something much more significant than anyone had intended. The alien responses were too realistic, too emotionally complex, and too strategically sophisticated to be simple computer programs. But the alternative explanation was impossible to accept. They were just 5 cadets in a training simulation, not an actual military force capable of defeating alien civilizations. The impossible was becoming routine, and reality was about to intrude in ways none of them were prepared to handle. Jake felt the simulation pod opening around him as emergency extraction protocols activated without warning. The familiar hum of the Luna-based training facility replaced the alien atmosphere he had been breathing moments before. His squad mates were being extracted from their pods simultaneously, all looking confused and disoriented by the sudden termination of their exercise. Colonel Hayes stood nearby with an expression Jake had never seen on her face before, something between shock and barely controlled panic. Lisa climbed out of her tactical coordination pod and immediately noticed that the normal post-simulation debriefing setup was missing. Instead of the usual analysis screens and performance review stations, the chamber was filled with military personnel she did not recognize. Senior officers wearing insignia from Solar System Command, people in civilian clothes who carried themselves like intelligence operatives, and technical specialists working frantically at quantum communication arrays that were definitely not standard academy equipment. Ryan stepped onto the chamber floor and felt his legs shake slightly from the transition between different gravity levels. But what caught his attention was the absolute silence in the room, despite the presence of dozens of personnel. Everyone was staring at the 5 cadets with expressions that ranged from amazement to something that looked almost like fear. This was not the atmosphere of a completed training exercise, and Ryan's demolitions training had taught him to recognize when situations were about to explode in unexpected ways. Katie automatically began checking her squad mates for signs of simulation sickness or neural feedback trauma, but found instead that they all showed the biological markers of actual combat stress rather than virtual reality after effects. Their adrenaline levels, muscle tension patterns, and neurological responses were identical to what she would expect from real battlefield conditions. Her medical training told her that simulation technology could not produce such authentic physiological responses. Alex discovered that his communication equipment was still receiving the alien signals even outside the simulation pods. The quantum entanglement transmitters in his gear were picking up broadcasts from across the galaxy, and the translation software was now providing clear interpretations of multiple alien languages. What he was hearing made his blood run cold. With the realization that their training exercise had been something else entirely, Admiral George Patterson entered the chamber with a full honor guard, his face showing the strain of someone who had not slept in days. Jake recognized the Admiral from Academy orientation ceremonies, but had never seen him look so grave. Patterson stopped in front of the 5 cadets and studied each of them carefully before speaking in a voice that carried the weight of enormous responsibility. "Cadets, you have just participated in the most significant military action in human history," Patterson said, his words cutting through the chamber's silence like physical objects. What you believed was a training simulation was actually a real-time tactical interface connected to military operations across 12 different star systems. Your actions over the past 18 hours have resulted in the surrender of 3 major galactic civilizations. Lisa felt her tactical analysis, training trying to process information that seemed impossible to accept. Sir, that cannot be accurate. We were participating in a virtual reality exercise using theoretical alien combat scenarios. We never left the Luna-based training facility. Colonel Hayes stepped forward with data tablets displaying quantum surveillance, feeds from distant star systems. The Galactic Conflict Simulator was not a simulation at all. It was an experimental program that allowed you to control actual military drones operating on real alien battlefields. Every enemy you faced, every environment you adapted to, every tactical decision you made was occurring in real time across known space. Ryan stared at the tactical displays showing the aftermath of his demolitions work on alien worlds light years away. Entire cities reduced to rubble, defensive installations collapsed into crater fields, and military installations that had existed for millennia now completely destroyed. Sir, you are telling us that we actually killed alien beings and destroyed their civilizations? Admiral Patterson activated holographic displays showing the current state of galactic civilization. Star maps displayed the territories of dozens of alien species, with 3 massive empires now marked as formally surrendered to human authority. The Zephyrian Empire surrendered after losing their entire 4th Fleet to what they described as tactically impossible Deathworld entities. The Nexari Crystal Assembly abandoned their home system rather than face further losses. The Valdorian Collective offered tribute and eternal non-aggression pacts after their psychic warriors were driven insane by contact with human minds. Katie felt her medical training struggling to process the ethical implications of what they had unknowingly participated in. Admiral, if we were actually conducting military operations against real civilizations, why were we not informed? How could such a program be authorized without the knowledge of the participants? The intelligence operatives in civilian clothes exchanged glances before one of them stepped forward. The program was originally designed as pure observation using quantum surveillance technology to monitor alien military activities for defensive intelligence gathering. The tactical interface was added as an experimental feature to test human strategic capabilities against theoretical scenarios. No one anticipated that your performance would exceed galactic military norms by such extraordinary margins. Alex shared the alien communications he had been intercepting, and the translation specialists immediately confirmed his analysis. The broadcasts were genuine military transmissions from across known space, filled with references to human tactical capabilities that defied alien understanding of warfare. The aliens are calling us Deathworld demons and reality-defying destruction entities. They believe Earth represents an unstoppable military threat to galactic civilization. Jake tried to understand how 5 cadets in a training exercise could have such massive consequences. Admiral, what does this mean for Earth and humanity? We were just trying to pass our final Academy examination. Patterson activated displays showing the diplomatic crisis now unfolding across dozens of star systems. Your actions have fundamentally altered the balance of power in galactic civilization. Hundreds of alien governments are reassessing their military capabilities and strategic alliances based on what they witnessed. Some are offering alliance terms, others are preparing defensive measures, and a few are considering preemptive strikes against what they perceive as an existential threat. The technical specialists presented analysis of human tactical performance compared to galactic military standards. Every metric showed capabilities that alien civilizations considered impossible. Human psychological resilience, adaptability, creative problem-solving, and ability to function under extreme stress were so far beyond galactic norms that alien military analysts had initially dismissed the data as sensor malfunctions. Lisa studied the strategic implications and realized the magnitude of Earth's situation. We have become the dominant military power in known space without ever intending to demonstrate military capability. Every alien civilization now sees humanity as either a potential ally or an existential threat. Colonel Hayes presented the classified files that revealed the extent of Earth's secret observation of galactic civilization. We have been monitoring alien activities for 3 years, gathering intelligence about potential threats to human expansion into space. The tactical interface was meant to be a training tool, not an actual weapons system. Ryan examined the destruction patterns his explosives had created across multiple worlds and felt the weight of unintended consequences. How many alien casualties resulted from our actions? What is the humanitarian cost of what we accidentally accomplished? The casualty reports were staggering. Military losses in the millions, economic disruption across entire sectors of galactic space, and social upheaval in civilizations that had existed peacefully for millennia. Katie realized that her medical training had prepared her to save lives, not to cope with having inadvertently caused massive loss of life across the galaxy. Admiral Patterson looked at each cadet individually before delivering his final briefing. You 5 individuals have changed the course of galactic history. The question now is what humanity does with the power and responsibility that your actions have created. The galaxy is watching, and our next decisions will determine whether we become leaders or conquerors. The truth was finally revealed, but the real challenge was just beginning. Jake sat in the diplomatic briefing room 3 weeks after learning the truth about their training exercise, struggling to accept his new role as Earth's first interstellar ambassador. The weight of representing humanity to alien civilizations that feared and respected his species felt impossible to bear. But Admiral Patterson had made it clear that the 5 cadets who had accidentally conquered half the galaxy were the only humans who could credibly negotiate with the surrendering alien governments. Lisa studied intelligence reports from across known space and realized that their actions had created a power vacuum affecting hundreds of worlds. The 3 major empires that had surrendered were no longer maintaining their previous alliance structures, leaving smaller civilizations without protection from aggressive neighbors. Her tactical training told her that the galaxy was heading toward widespread conflict unless humanity took action to stabilize the situation they had inadvertently created. Ryan examined casualty reports from the alien worlds where his demolitions work had caused massive destruction. The numbers were staggering, but what troubled him more was learning that many of the installations he had destroyed were not purely military targets. Cultural sites, research facilities, and civilian infrastructure had been located within the fortified areas he had brought down with his precisely placed explosives. His mining background had taught him to think about the consequences of controlled destruction, but nothing had prepared him for destruction on an interstellar scale. Katie worked with xenobiology specialists to understand the medical needs of the alien species that had been affected by their military actions. Her field medicine training was proving valuable in developing treatment protocols for injury patterns caused by human weapons and tactics. But more importantly, she was learning to provide medical assistance as a form of diplomacy, showing alien civilizations that humanity's military capabilities came with genuine concern for the welfare of other species. Alex spent his days establishing communication protocols with the surrendering alien governments, using his linguistics training to build bridges between species that had never encountered human psychology. The translation work was challenging because many alien concepts had no human equivalent, and many human ideas seemed impossible for aliens to understand. But gradually, patterns of mutual comprehension were emerging from the chaos of first contact. The first major diplomatic breakthrough came when Jake met with representatives from the Zephyrian Empire in a neutral space station orbiting a dead star system. The Zephyrian delegation arrived expecting to negotiate surrender terms with a conquering military force, but instead found 5 young humans who seemed more interested in understanding than dominating. The lead Zephyrian diplomat, a being whose crystalline exoskeleton reflected light in patterns that indicated emotional states, admitted that human tactical capabilities had shattered every assumption about warfare that galactic civilization had developed over millennia. Lisa presented the Zephyrians with defensive alliance proposals rather than occupation terms. Her analysis had shown that the galaxy needed stable power structures, not human dominance, and that Earth's interests were best served by helping maintain peace rather than ruling through fear. The Zephyrian military advisors were confused by tactical strategies designed to protect rather than conquer, but gradually began to understand that human warfare capabilities were paired with diplomatic goals that prioritized cooperation over submission. Ryan worked with Zephyrian engineers to develop reconstruction plans for the installations he had destroyed during the training exercise. His demolitions expertise translated surprisingly well to construction and repair work, and he found that the precision skills he had learned for destroying targets could be applied to rebuilding them more efficiently than before. The collaborative engineering projects became symbols of human willingness to repair the damage their military actions had caused. Katie established medical exchange programs between human and Zephyrian medical services, sharing field medicine, techniques that had proven effective during the alien conflicts. Her adaptability under pressure, which had been a military asset during the training exercise, became a diplomatic tool for showing that human capabilities were meant to preserve life rather than destroy it. The medical cooperation programs were among the most successful aspects of the early diplomatic initiatives. Alex developed translation protocols that allowed real-time communication between human and Zephyrian military commanders, making possible the kind of tactical cooperation that could prevent future conflicts. His work revealed that many galactic conflicts arose from misunderstandings rather than genuine hostility, and that human communication skills could serve as a bridge between species with incompatible psychological frameworks. The negotiations with the Nexari crystal assembly presented different challenges because their entire civilization was built around collective consciousness structures that human psychology could barely comprehend. Jake found himself serving as a diplomatic interface between individual human decision-making and alien group mind consensus systems. The process was exhausting and often frustrating, but it produced agreements that satisfied both species' fundamental needs for security and autonomy. Lisa developed strategic frameworks that allowed the Nexari to maintain their collective decision-making processes while participating in galactic diplomatic structures designed around individual representatives. Her tactical training had taught her to adapt to unexpected conditions, and she applied those same skills to creating political solutions that bridged incompatible social systems. Ryan collaborated with Nexari crystal shapers to develop construction techniques that combined human engineering principles with alien materials science. The collaborative projects produced architectural innovations that neither species could have achieved independently, demonstrating that human military capabilities could be transformed into tools for creative cooperation rather than destruction. Katie learned to provide medical care for beings whose biology was based on crystalline matrices rather than organic chemistry. Her field medicine experience had taught her to adapt treatment protocols to unexpected conditions, and she applied that flexibility to developing healthcare approaches that worked across completely different forms of life. The medical cooperation became a model for other areas of human-alien collaboration. Alex established communication networks that connected human diplomatic missions with Nexari collective consciousness nodes, creating the first permanent channels for ongoing dialogue between species with fundamentally different cognitive structures. His translation work was laying the foundation for long-term peaceful coexistence between humanity and civilizations that had once seemed completely alien. The final major diplomatic challenge came with the Valdorian collective, whose psychic abilities had been overwhelmed by contact with human minds during the training exercise. Jake led diplomatic missions to Valdorian space stations, where the crew had to wear specially designed mental shielding to prevent accidental psychic contact that could cause psychological trauma to their alien hosts. The diplomatic solutions that emerged from months of careful negotiation established humanity as a mediating force in galactic affairs rather than a conquering power. Jake and his team had transformed their accidental military victory into the foundation for lasting peace between species that had never before found common ground for cooperation. Earth's role in galactic civilization was no longer that of an unknown threat, but of a bridge between incompatible cultures that could find stability through human diplomatic mediation. The 5 cadets who had begun as students learning to fight simulated enemies had become teachers, showing former adversaries how to transform fear into friendship. The galaxy was safer not because humanity had proven its military superiority, but because it had chosen to use that strength to build rather than destroy.